Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day or evening, wherever you are in the world right now. And speaking of that, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you, because I always love hearing from viewers around the globe. Today, we're going to embark on a fascinating journey into one of the most misunderstood aspects of pirate life, something that Hollywood movies and adventure books rarely get right. And that's what pirates actually ate and drank during their time sailing the seven seas. Now, when most people think about pirates, they imagine swashbuckling adventures, buried treasure, and dramatic sword fights. But the reality of pirate life was far more complex and interesting than what we see in popular culture, especially when it came to their daily survival needs, like food and water. The truth is that understanding what pirates ate and drank gives us incredible insight into their entire way of life, their challenges, their ingenuity, and their humanity. Because at the end of the day, these were real people who had to solve real problems about staying alive on long ocean voyages where fresh food and clean water were precious commodities that could mean the difference between life and death. So get comfortable. Maybe grab a snack or your favorite drink, because we're going to spend the next few hours exploring this captivating topic in detail, covering everything from the basic ship provisions that kept crews alive to the exotic foods they discovered in far-off lands, the creative ways they preserved and prepared their meals, their drinking habits both necessary and recreational, and how their eating patterns compared to people living on land during the same time period. The story of pirate cuisine is really a story of survival, adaptation, and sometimes surprising sophistication. And I think by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a completely new appreciation for the daily realities these seafaring adventurers faced. When we talk about what pirates ate, we first need to understand the fundamental challenge of ocean travel in the 17th and 18th centuries, which was the complete lack of refrigeration and the limited storage space aboard ships that were already packed with weapons, treasure, supplies, and crew members living in incredibly cramped conditions. The ocean environment itself presented unique problems for food storage because the constant motion of the ship, the salt air, the humidity, and the temperature changes could quickly spoil even the hardiest provisions. So pirates had to rely on foods that could survive weeks or even months at sea without going bad. The foundation of any pirate ship's food supply was what sailors called ship's biscuit or hardtack, which was essentially a very hard, dry cracker made from just flour, water, and sometimes salt, baked until it was rock solid and could theoretically last for years if kept dry. These biscuits were so hard that sailors often had to soak them in water, rum, or whatever liquid they had available just to make them edible, and they were notorious for becoming infested with weevils and other insects, which pirates simply accepted as an additional source of protein. Experienced pirates would often tap their hardtack against the table or deck before eating it to knock out the weevils, and many crew members developed the habit of eating their ship's biscuit in the dark so they couldn't see the insects crawling around in their food. The production of ship's biscuit was actually a specialized industry in major ports, with bakeries dedicated to producing these long-lasting crackers in massive quantities for naval and merchant vessels, and the quality could vary significantly, depending on the baker's skill and the quality of flour used. Pirates would sometimes raid these bakeries, specifically to obtain fresh supplies of hardtack, because newly baked ship's biscuit was considerably more palatable than the aged, insect-infested versions they might have been eating for months. Salt pork and salt beef formed another crucial part of their diet, preserved in barrels packed with coarse salt that drew out moisture and prevented bacterial growth, though this meat was often so salty and tough that it required long soaking and cooking to become palatable. The salting process itself was quite elaborate, with large pieces of pork or beef being packed in layers of salt and then pressed down to remove as much moisture as possible before being sealed in wooden barrels. The quality of salt meat depended heavily on the freshness of the original meat and the skill of the person doing the salting. And pirates quickly learned to recognize the difference between properly preserved meat and inferior products that might spoil quickly or make them sick. Some pirates became quite skilled at preparing salt meat, learning to soak it in fresh water or even seawater to remove excess salt, then boiling it slowly to make it more tender and flavorful. The fat from salt pork was particularly valuable because it could be used for cooking other foods, providing calories and flavor that helped make other provisions more palatable. Pirates often saved the liquid from boiling salt meat to use as a base for soups and stews, creating hearty meals that could feed large numbers of crew members from relatively small amounts of meat. Fish was a major protein source that pirates could catch fresh from the ocean, and experienced crews became quite skilled at fishing during their voyages, using simple lines and hooks to catch everything from small fish for immediate consumption to larger catches that could feed the entire crew. The techniques for fishing from a moving ship required considerable skill and experience because pirates had to account for the vessel's motion, wind conditions, and the behavior of different types of fish in various ocean regions. Some pirates became legendary for their fishing abilities, able to catch fish consistently, even in challenging conditions, making them valuable crew members who could supplement the ship's food supply with fresh protein. The types of fish available varied dramatically depending on the geographic region and the season, with pirates operating in the Caribbean having access to completely different species than those sailing in the North Atlantic or the Mediterranean. Deep-sea fishing required different techniques and equipment than coastal fishing, and pirates had to adapt their methods based on whether they were in open ocean or near shorelines where different types of fish might be available. The preservation of fresh fish was another challenge, because catches had to be consumed quickly or preserved through salting, smoking, or drying before they spoiled in the warm, humid conditions aboard ship. Some pirates learned to catch and prepare fish in ways that maximized their nutritional value, understanding that fresh fish provided vitamins and nutrients that were often lacking in their preserved food supplies. The social aspects of fishing were also important, because successful fishing expeditions could boost crew morale and provide opportunities for friendly competition and skill sharing among crew members. Pirates also relied heavily on legumes like dried peas, beans, and lentils, which were nutritious, relatively compact, and could be made into filling stews when combined with whatever meat or vegetables they had available. These legumes were particularly valuable because they provided protein, fiber, and essential nutrients that helped prevent nutritional deficiencies that could weaken crew members and make them susceptible to disease. The preparation of dried legumes required considerable time and fuel because they had to be soaked overnight and then boiled for hours to become tender enough to eat. But the resulting meals were filling and nutritious. Pirates often combined different types of legumes with whatever meat, vegetables, or seasonings they had available, creating hearty stews that could feed large numbers of people from relatively small amounts of ingredients. The storage of dried legumes was relatively straightforward compared to other provisions, because they could be kept in simple cloth bags or wooden containers as long as they were protected from moisture and rodents. Some pirate crews developed signature recipes for legume-based stews, with experienced cooks learning to combine different ingredients in ways that created flavorful and satisfying meals that crew members looked forward to. Rice was another staple food that many pirate ships carried, especially those operating in the Caribbean and other tropical regions, where rice was commonly available and could be purchased or stolen from merchant vessels or coastal settlements. Versatility of rice made it particularly valuable for pirate crews because it could be prepared in many different ways and combined with almost any other ingredients they might have available. Rice was relatively easy to store and transport, taking up less space than some other grain products and remaining edible for long periods if kept dry and protected from insects. The cooking of rice aboard ship presented some challenges because it required careful attention to water ratios and cooking times. But experienced ship's cooks learned to prepare rice perfectly, even in the challenging conditions of a ship's galley. Some pirates became quite sophisticated in their rice preparations, learning to create different types of rice dishes that reflected the culinary traditions of various cultures they encountered during their travels. The combination of rice with fish, meat, vegetables, and spices could create complex and flavorful meals that provided variety and nutrition for crews that might otherwise be eating very monotonous diets. The preparation of these basic ingredients required creativity and skill because pirates had to work with very limited cooking facilities, usually just a single galley with a simple stove or firebox that had to serve dozens of hungry crew members. The ship's cook was actually a very important position aboard a pirate vessel, often one of the few crew members who might receive a slightly larger share of treasure or booty, because keeping the crew well fed was essential for maintaining morale and preventing mutiny. These cooks had to be resourceful in stretching limited ingredients, combining whatever was available into meals that would fill stomachs and provide enough nutrition to keep hard-working sailors functional during long, physically demanding voyages. The daily routine of a ship's cook was incredibly demanding, requiring them to rise before dawn to begin preparing meals for crews that might number dozens of hungry, hard-working men who expected regular meals regardless of weather conditions or other challenges. The cook had to manage limited supplies carefully, planning meals days or weeks in advance to ensure that provisions would last until the next opportunity to resupply, while also dealing with spoilage and waste that could quickly reduce available food supplies. The relationship between the cook and the crew was often complex, because the cook wielded considerable influence over crew morale and satisfaction, but also had to work within the constraints of available ingredients and the captain's orders. About rationing and food distribution. Some ship's cooks became quite famous within pirate communities for their ability to create delicious and satisfying meals from minimal ingredients, earning reputations that could help them secure positions on successful and well-supplied pirate vessels. The tools and equipment available to ship's cooks were necessarily simple and durable, designed to function in the challenging environment of a ship's galley, where space was limited and conditions could be dangerous during rough weather. Galley itself was usually a small, cramped space located in the forward part of the ship, equipped with a simple stove or firebox that had to be carefully managed to prevent fires that could destroy the entire vessel. Cooking pots and pans had to be designed to remain stable during the ship's motion, often featuring special handles or mounting systems that prevented them from sliding around during rough weather. The storage of cooking equipment and utensils required careful organization to make efficient use of limited space while keeping essential tools accessible during meal preparation. Some ship's cooks became quite skilled at improvising cooking equipment from available materials, creating functional tools from captured items or materials that could be obtained during port visits. Water was perhaps even more critical than food, because humans can survive much longer without eating than without drinking, and finding reliable sources of fresh water was a constant concern for pirate crews, who might spend weeks or months away from land. Ships carried water in large wooden barrels, but this water would quickly become stagnant and develop algae, bacteria, and an unpleasant taste that made it barely drinkable. So pirates learned to add various substances to make their water supply more palatable and safer to consume. The construction and maintenance of water barrels was a specialized skill that required careful attention to the wood used, the sealing methods, and the treatment of the interior surfaces to prevent contamination and extend the life of stored water. Some pirates became quite knowledgeable about water storage techniques, learning to treat their barrels with various substances that helped prevent bacterial growth and maintain water quality during long voyages. The daily management of water. Supplies required careful rationing and monitoring to ensure that crews would have adequate hydration throughout their voyage, with officers responsible for tracking consumption and preventing waste. The quality of stored water could vary dramatically depending on the source of the original water, the condition of the storage containers, and the length of time the water had been in storage. Pirates often had to drink water that was green, with algae, foul-smelling, and barely palatable, but they developed various methods for improving the taste and safety of their water supplies. One common practice was to add a small amount of vinegar to water barrels, which helped prevent some bacterial growth and masked the unpleasant taste of old water, though this created its own strong acidic flavor that took some getting used to. The vinegar used for water treatment was often the same vinegar that might be used for cooking or food preservation, making it a multi-purpose substance that earned a place in the ship's essential supplies. Some pirates experimented with other additives to improve their water quality, including various herbs, spices, or even small amounts of alcohol that might help kill bacteria and improve the taste of stale water. The sourcing of fresh water during port visits or stops at islands was a critical activity that required careful planning and sometimes significant risk, because pirates had to expose themselves to potential capture or attack when approaching settlements or known water sources. Some pirate crews became quite skilled at locating and accessing fresh water sources on uninhabited islands, developing knowledge of where to find springs, streams, or other sources of clean water that could be used to replenish their supplies. Beer was actually considered a safer and more practical drink than water for long ocean voyages, because the alcohol content and the brewing process killed many harmful bacteria, and beer provided calories and some nutritional value beyond just hydration. The production of beer specifically for long sea voyages was a specialized industry that created stronger, more heavily hopped beers that could survive the conditions of ocean travel better than the lighter beers consumed on land. Pirates consumed enormous quantities of beer when it was available, with some records suggesting that crew members might drink several quarts per day, which was considered normal and necessary rather than excessive for the time period. The storage of beer aboard ship required special containers and careful handling to prevent spoilage, with pirates learning to protect their beer supplies from temperature changes and contamination that could ruin large quantities of this valuable beverage. The brewing process itself was sometimes attempted aboard ship, though this was challenging due to the need for specific ingredients, equipment, and controlled conditions that were difficult to maintain during ocean voyages. Some pirates became quite knowledgeable about different types of beer and could identify the quality and origin of various brews they encountered during their travels, making them valuable for selecting the best beverages when raiding merchant vessels. The cultural significance of beer in pirate communities reflected broader European drinking traditions, with beer serving as a social lubricant and a symbol of hospitality and fellowship among crew members. Wine was another alcoholic beverage that pirates frequently consumed, either purchased legitimately in ports or more commonly seized from captured merchant ships, and different types of wine from various regions became prized commodities that crews would fight over or use as bargaining chips. The variety of wines available to pirates was enormous, reflecting the sophisticated international wine trade that existed during the golden age of piracy, with vessels carrying wines from France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and other wine-producing regions. The storage and preservation of wine aboard ship required careful attention to temperature control and protection from light and vibration that could damage the quality of fine wines, though pirates were often more concerned with quantity than quality when it came to their wine consumption. Some pirates developed considerable expertise in wine, learning to identify valuable vintages and understanding the proper care and serving of fine wines that they might capture from wealthy merchant vessels. The social aspects of wine consumption were important in pirate culture, with fine wines often reserved for special occasions or celebrations, while lower quality wines might be consumed as part of daily rations. The trading value of captured wines could be substantial, with rare or high-quality wines serving as valuable commodities that could be sold or traded for other essential supplies. The geographic distribution of wine consumption among pirates reflected the trade routes and regional preferences they encountered, with Caribbean pirates having access to different wines than those operating in the Mediterranean or other regions. Rum, however, became the most iconic pirate drink, partly because it was commonly produced in the Caribbean, where many pirates operated, and partly because it was strong enough to remain stable during long voyages without spoiling like beer or wine might. The production of rum from sugarcane was a major industry in the Caribbean, creating a readily available supply of this potent alcoholic beverage that could be obtained through legitimate trade or piracy. The strength and stability of rum made it particularly valuable for long ocean voyages, because it could be stored for extended periods without spoiling and could be mixed with water or other beverages to create a variety of different drinks. The famous daily rum ration that became standard in many navies actually originated from practical considerations about providing crews with safe, calorie-rich beverages that wouldn't spoil in tropical climates. Pirates often mixed their rum with water, citrus juice, and sometimes sugar to create more palatable drinks that also provided some protection against scurvy and other nutritional diseases. The cultural association between pirates and rum was reinforced by the fact that many pirates operated in the Caribbean, where rum was produced, making it a natural choice for crews that needed a reliable source of alcohol for both practical and recreational purposes. The quality of rum could vary dramatically depending on the distillery and the aging process, with some pirates developing preferences for specific types or brands of rum that they considered superior to others. The use of rum as a medicinal substance was common among pirates, who believed that alcohol could help prevent disease and treat various ailments, though this belief was based more on tradition and scientific understanding. The social rituals surrounding rum consumption were important in pirate culture, with the sharing of rum serving as a way to build camaraderie and celebrate successful raids or other achievements. The trading value of rum made it a valuable commodity that pirates could use for bartering with other crews or purchasing supplies from merchants who were willing to deal with pirates. When pirates had the opportunity to raid merchant ships or attack coastal settlements, they would often prioritize food and drink among their most valuable prizes, sometimes even more than gold or silver, because these consumable goods were immediately useful for keeping the crew alive and happy. The identification of valuable food and drink cargo required considerable knowledge and experience, because pirates had to quickly assess the quality and value of various provisions, while conducting raids under dangerous and time-pressured conditions. Successful pirate crews might capture ships loaded with luxury foods like fine wines, expensive spices, exotic fruits, fancy cheeses, or preserved meats that were far superior to their usual basic provisions, creating temporary periods of relative abundance and celebration. The distribution of captured food and drink among crew members was often a source of conflict, because everyone wanted access to the best provisions, but there usually wasn't enough luxury food to satisfy everyone's desires. Some pirate crews developed formal systems for distributing captured provisions, with specific rules about how special foods would be shared and who would get priority access to particularly desirable items. The celebration that followed successful food captures was an important part of pirate culture, providing opportunities for crew members to bond over shared meals and drinks that represented the rewards of their dangerous profession. The strategic planning of raids sometimes specifically targeted vessels known to be carrying valuable food and drink cargo, with pirates gathering intelligence about shipping schedules and cargo manifests to identify the most promising targets. The types of food available to pirates varied significantly depending on their geographic location and the shipping routes they frequented, because different regions of the world had different agricultural products and trading patterns that influenced what could be captured or purchased. Pirates operating in the Caribbean had access to tropical fruits like mangoes, pineapples, coconuts, and citrus fruits that not only provided variety in their diet, but also essential vitamins that helped prevent diseases like scurvy that could devastate crews eating only preserved foods. The abundance of tropical fruits in the Caribbean created opportunities for pirates to supplement their diet with fresh, vitamin-rich foods that were often unavailable to sailors operating in other parts of the world. The preparation and consumption of tropical fruits required some knowledge and skill, because some fruits had to be properly ripened or prepared to be safe and palatable, while others could be eaten immediately after harvesting. The preservation of tropical fruits for later consumption was challenging because most of these fruits spoiled quickly in the warm, humid conditions aboard ship, though some pirates learned to dry or otherwise preserve certain fruits for extended storage. The cultural exchange that occurred when pirates from different backgrounds encountered tropical fruits for the first time created interesting dynamics, with some crew members embracing new foods while others remained suspicious of unfamiliar fruits. The medicinal properties of various tropical fruits were gradually recognized by experienced pirates, who learned that citrus fruits could prevent scurvy and that other fruits might help treat various ailments or provide specific nutritional benefits. Those sailing in the Mediterranean might encounter different varieties of wine, olive oil, dried fruits, nuts, and preserved fish that reflected the culinary traditions of the region and provided different nutritional benefits. The sophisticated food culture of the Mediterranean region meant that pirates operating in these waters had access to a wide variety of preserved foods, seasonings, and cooking ingredients that could significantly improve the quality and variety of their meals. The olive oil that was commonly transported through the Mediterranean was particularly valuable for pirates because it could be used for cooking, food preservation, and even medicinal purposes, making it a multi-purpose substance that was highly prized. The variety of nuts and dried fruits available in the Mediterranean provided concentrated sources of calories and nutrients that were ideal for long ocean voyages. Though these foods were often expensive and might be specifically targeted by pirates conducting raids, the preserved fish that was common in Mediterranean trade included various types of salt-cured and dried fish that provided protein and flavor for pirate crews, often representing significant improvements over the basic salt meat that formed the foundation of most ships' provisions. The wine culture of the Mediterranean meant that pirates operating in this region had access to a tremendous variety of different wines, creating opportunities for crews to develop sophisticated tastes and preferences that reflected the diverse wine-producing regions of the area. The spices and seasonings that were commonly transported through the Mediterranean could transform basic ship's provisions into more flavorful and appealing meals, making these substances particularly valuable for improving crew morale and satisfaction. Pirates in the Indian Ocean and South China Sea could access exotic spices, rice varieties, different types of seafood, and unique preserved foods that were completely unknown to their European counterparts, and added tremendous variety to their meals. The spice trade that flowed through the Indian Ocean represented some of the most valuable cargo in the world, with small quantities of rare spices being worth enormous amounts of money and providing flavoring that could transform basic foods into exotic and delicious meals. The variety of rice types available in Asian markets provided pirates with different textures, flavors, and nutritional profiles that were far superior to the basic rice that might be available in European or American markets. The seafood that was commonly preserved and transported in Asian waters, included various types of dried fish, fermented fish products, and other marine foods that provided protein and unique flavors that were completely different from European preserved foods. The fermented and pickled foods that were common in Asian cuisine provided pirates with sources of probiotics and preserved vegetables that could improve their health and digestion, though these foods might initially seem strange or unpalatable to crew members from other cultural backgrounds. The tea that was commonly transported in this region provided pirates with a beverage that was both flavorful and potentially beneficial for health, though the proper preparation of tea required knowledge and equipment that might not be readily available aboard pirate vessels. The unique cooking techniques and food preparation, methods that pirates could observe and learn from Asian cultures, provided opportunities for expanding their culinary skills and creating more varied and interesting meals from available ingredients. The seasonality of different foods also played a major role in pirate dining, because certain times of year would provide better opportunities for fresh provisions, while other periods might require careful rationing of stored supplies. Spring and summer offered better fishing, opportunities to gather fresh fruits and vegetables from islands or coastal areas, and generally more favorable conditions for finding food, while winter voyages required more careful planning and heavier reliance on preserved provisions. The seasonal migration patterns of fish and other marine life meant that pirates could sometimes predict where and when they would have the best opportunities for catching fresh seafood, allowing them to plan their routes and activities around these natural cycles. The seasonal availability of fresh water was also a crucial factor in pirate operations, because the rainy seasons in different regions provided opportunities to collect fresh water, while dry seasons might create serious shortages that could threaten crew survival. The seasonal patterns of merchant shipping meant that certain times of year would provide better opportunities for capturing food-laden vessels, with harvest seasons creating periods when ships might be carrying particularly large quantities of fresh provisions. The weather patterns associated with different seasons affected food storage and preparation aboard ship, with hot weather creating additional challenges for preserving fresh food, while cold weather might make cooking more difficult, but also help preserve some types of provisions. The seasonal availability of various fruits and vegetables in different regions meant that pirates could sometimes plan their travels to coincide with periods when specific foods would be abundant and easily obtained. Pirates became quite knowledgeable about edible plants, fruits, and other natural food sources they might encounter on various islands and coastlines, developing a kind of practical botany that helped them supplement their ship's provisions with fresh, vitamin-rich foods when possible. The identification of safe, edible plants required considerable knowledge and experience, because mistaking poisonous plants for edible ones could have fatal consequences for crew members who consumed them. Some crew members developed particular expertise in foraging and plant identification, making them valuable for their ability to find food sources that other crew members might overlook or avoid. The preparation of wild plants and fruits often required specific knowledge about proper cooking methods, timing, and combinations that would make these foods safe and palatable for consumption. The seasonal availability of different edible plants meant that pirates had to understand the natural cycles of various regions and plan their foraging activities accordingly. The cultural knowledge about edible plants that was shared among crew members from different backgrounds created opportunities for learning and expanding the range of foods that could be safely consumed. The medicinal properties of various plants were often as important as their nutritional value, with some plants serving dual purposes as both food and medicine for treating various ailments. Some crews included members who had lived in various regions and could identify safe, edible, local foods that others might not recognize, making this knowledge a valuable skill that could contribute to crew survival. The trading of botanical knowledge between different pirate crews created networks of information that helped improve survival rates and food security for pirates operating in various regions. The documentation of plant knowledge in personal journals or shared oral traditions helped preserve this information and pass it down to new crew members who needed to learn these essential survival skills. The experimentation with new and unfamiliar plants required careful testing and gradual introduction to avoid poisoning, with experienced crew members developing systematic approaches to evaluating potential food sources. The combination of wild plants with ship's provisions could create more varied and nutritious meals that provided essential vitamins and minerals that were often lacking in preserved foods. The social aspects of eating aboard pirate ships were also quite interesting, because meals were often communal affairs that helped build crew cohesion and provided opportunities for sharing news, planning activities, and resolving conflicts. The daily routine of food preparation and consumption created structure in what could otherwise be chaotic and dangerous lives, giving crews something to look forward to and helping maintain morale during difficult periods. The communal nature of eating meant that meal times were important social events where crew members could interact, share stories, and build the relationships that were essential for effective cooperation during dangerous activities. The sharing of food preparation duties provided opportunities for crew members to learn from each other and develop skills that could be valuable for survival, while also creating bonds through shared work and mutual dependence. Pirates often had informal but important social rules about food sharing, ensuring that everyone received fair portions and that no one hoarded supplies that belonged to the entire crew, because food disputes could quickly escalate into serious conflicts that threatened the unity of the group. The enforcement of food sharing rules required leadership and sometimes intervention from officers or respected crew members who could mediate disputes and maintain order during mealtimes. The cultural traditions around food that were brought by crew members from different backgrounds created opportunities for sharing and learning about different cuisines and cooking methods. The celebration of special occasions through food was an important part of maintaining crew morale and creating positive experiences that balanced the hardships and dangers of pirate life. Special occasions like successful raids, holidays, or the capture of particularly valuable prizes might be celebrated with elaborate meals using the best food and drink available, creating memorable experiences that strengthened crew bonds and provided motivation for future endeavors. The planning and preparation of celebratory meals required cooperation and coordination among crew members, creating shared goals and activities that brought people together in positive ways. The distribution of special foods during celebrations had to be carefully managed to ensure fairness and prevent conflicts that could undermine the positive effects of these events. The traditions and rituals surrounding food celebrations helped create a sense of community and shared identity among crew members who might otherwise have little in common beyond their criminal activities. The relationship between food and health was crucial for pirate crews because malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, and food-related illnesses could quickly disable large numbers of crew members and leave ships vulnerable to attack or unable to function effectively. Scurvy was one of the most feared diseases among sailors, caused by a lack of vitamin C and resulting in weakness, bleeding gums, loose teeth, and eventually death if untreated. So pirates learned to value citrus fruits and other sources of this essential vitamin. The prevention of scurvy required regular consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, which meant that pirates had to actively seek out these foods during their travels and find ways to incorporate them into their diet even when they were expensive or difficult to obtain. The symptoms of scurvy were well known among experienced pirates, who could recognize the early signs of the disease and take action to prevent it from spreading throughout the crew. The treatment of scurvy required immediate access to fresh fruits or vegetables, which meant that pirates suffering from this disease had to prioritize finding these foods, even when other concerns might seem more pressing. Many pirate crews included members with some medical knowledge who understood the connection between diet and health, leading to practices like deliberately seeking out certain foods that were known to prevent or treat common maritime diseases. The role of the ship's doctor or medically knowledgeable crew members often included responsibility for monitoring the crew's nutritional health and making recommendations about diet and food procurement. The prevention of other nutritional diseases required understanding of the relationship between specific foods and health outcomes, with experienced pirates learning to recognize the signs of various deficiencies and take appropriate action. The treatment of food-related illnesses required both medical knowledge and access to appropriate foods or medicines, which meant that pirates had to balance their immediate needs with long-term health considerations. The impact of poor nutrition on crew performance was well understood by successful pirate captains, who realized that investing in better food and nutrition would improve their crew's effectiveness and reduce the risk of disease-related losses. The preservation of food aboard pirate ships required constant attention and various techniques to prevent spoilage and waste, because losing supplies to rot or contamination could mean the difference between survival and starvation during long voyages. Smoking was one method used to preserve fresh fish and meat, creating a portable protein source that could last for weeks if properly prepared and stored in dry conditions. The construction of smoking equipment aboard ship required improvisation and careful fire management, because the smoking process needed controlled heat and airflow while avoiding the risk of fires that could destroy the entire vessel. The selection of appropriate wood for smoking was important because different types of wood would impart different flavors and had different burning characteristics that could affect the quality of the preserved food. The timing and temperature control required for effective smoking demanded considerable skill and experience, with crew members learning to judge the proper conditions for creating well-preserved, flavorful smoked foods. The storage of smoked foods required protection from moisture and pests, with pirates developing various methods for wrapping and containing smoked meats and fish to maximize their storage life. Salting was the most common preservation technique, but it required large quantities of salt that had to be acquired through trade, purchase, or theft, making salt itself a valuable commodity that crews had to carefully manage. The quality of salt used for preservation could vary dramatically, with some types of salt being more effective than others for preventing spoilage and maintaining food quality over extended periods. The techniques for salting different types of food required specific knowledge about the proper ratios of salt to food, the length of time required for proper curing, and the storage conditions needed to maintain the preserved food. The management of salt supplies required careful planning and rationing, because running out of salt could mean losing the ability to preserve fresh food that might be obtained during the voyage. The combination of salting with other preservation methods could create more effective preservation systems that extended the storage life of various foods beyond what could be achieved with salting alone. Drying was another preservation method that worked well in certain climates, allowing crews to create jerky-like preserved meats or dried fruits that remained edible for extended periods without spoiling. The construction of drying equipment aboard ship required creativity and adaptation to the limited space and resources available, with pirates learning to use rigging, sails, and other ship equipment to create effective drying systems. The climate and weather conditions affected the success of drying operations, with hot, dry weather providing ideal conditions, while humid or rainy weather could interfere with the drying process. The protection of drying food from insects, birds, and other pests required constant vigilance and various protective measures that could be challenging to implement in the open environment of a ship's deck. The timing of drying operations had to be carefully coordinated with other ship activities to avoid interference with sailing operations while ensuring that the drying process could be completed successfully. Some pirates learned preservation methods from different cultures they encountered, adopting techniques that were particularly well suited to maritime conditions, or that used ingredients readily available in certain regions. The fermentation techniques used in various cultures provided opportunities for creating preserved foods that had unique flavors and nutritional properties, though these methods required specific knowledge and controlled conditions that were challenging to maintain aboard ship. The pickling methods that were common in many cultures could be adapted for shipboard use, creating preserved vegetables and other foods that provided variety and nutrition while remaining stable during long voyages. The oil preservation techniques used in Mediterranean and other cultures could be adapted for preserving certain foods in sealed containers that protected them from air and moisture that would cause spoilage. The combination of different preservation methods from various cultures created opportunities for developing more effective and varied preservation systems that could handle a wider range of foods. The storage solutions for preserved foods had to protect against moisture, rodents, insects, and temperature changes while making efficient use of limited space aboard crowded pirate vessels. The construction of appropriate storage containers required materials and skills that might not always be available, forcing pirates to improvise and adapt whatever containers they could obtain or create. The organization of food storage had to balance accessibility with protection, ensuring that provisions could be accessed when needed while maintaining the conditions necessary for long-term preservation. The monitoring of stored food for signs of spoilage or contamination required regular inspection and the knowledge to recognize early warning signs that might indicate problems with particular food supplies. The rotation of food supplies to ensure that older items were used first required systematic organization and record keeping that could be challenging to maintain in the chaotic environment of a pirate ship. Pirates developed various methods for dealing with food contamination and spoilage, including ways to salvage partially spoiled provisions by removing bad portions and using what remained, because wasting food was simply not an option when resupply might be weeks or months away. The assessment of food safety required experience and judgment, because consuming spoiled food could cause illness or death, but discarding food that might still be safe could lead to starvation. The treatment of contaminated food containers and storage areas was important for preventing the spread of spoilage and contamination to other food supplies. The prevention of pest infestations in food storage areas required constant vigilance, and various control methods that could be challenging to implement in the confined space of a ship. The management of food waste and scraps had to balance the need to avoid attracting pests with the desire to avoid wasting anything that might have nutritional value. The cooking methods available to pirate crews were necessarily simple and practical, because ships' galleys had limited space, fuel, and equipment, requiring cooks to be creative with basic techniques like boiling, frying, and roasting. Stews were extremely popular among pirate crews because they could combine whatever ingredients were available into filling, nutritious meals that stretched limited supplies and made tough, preserved meats more palatable. The preparation of stews required skill in combining different ingredients in ways that created flavorful and nutritious meals, with experienced cooks learning to balance flavors and textures to create satisfying dishes from basic ingredients. The timing and temperature control required for successful stew preparation had to be adapted to the constraints of shipboard cooking, where fuel was limited and cooking conditions could be challenging. The variety of stews that could be created from available ingredients provided opportunities for culinary creativity and helped prevent the monotony that could result from eating the same foods repeatedly. One-pot meals were practical for shipboard cooking because they required minimal cleanup and could feed large numbers of people efficiently, while also conserving fuel and reducing the risk of fires that could be catastrophic aboard wooden ships. The development of one-pot cooking techniques that maximized flavor and nutrition while minimizing fuel consumption required considerable skill and experience from ship's cooks. The adaptation of traditional recipes to one-pot cooking methods allowed pirates to create familiar and satisfying meals, even when cooking conditions were far from ideal. The planning and preparation required for successful one-pot meals involved careful consideration of ingredient timing and cooking, sequences to ensure that all components would be properly cooked, and flavorful. Pirates often cooked large batches of food that could be eaten over several days, reducing the daily workload and ensuring that meals were available even when weather conditions made cooking difficult or dangerous. The reheating of pre-cooked meals required techniques that would restore flavor and texture while ensuring that the food remained safe to eat after being stored for several days. The storage and preservation of cooked meals for later consumption presented challenges similar to those faced with raw ingredients, requiring protection from spoilage and contamination while maintaining palatability. The planning of cooking schedules had to account for weather conditions, ship operations, and crew schedules to ensure that meals could be prepared and served when needed without interfering with other essential activities. The tools and equipment used for food preparation aboard pirate ships were basic but essential, including knives for cutting, pots for boiling, pans for frying, and various containers for storing and serving food to crew members. The maintenance and care of cooking equipment required constant attention because the salt air and harsh conditions aboard ship could quickly cause metal tools to rust and deteriorate if not properly maintained. The improvisation of cooking tools from available materials was a valuable skill that allowed pirates to create functional equipment when specialized cooking tools were unavailable or had been lost or damaged. The sharing and management of cooking equipment among crew members required organization and cooperation to ensure that everyone could prepare their food when needed without conflicts or delays. The storage and protection of valuable cooking tools was important because losing essential equipment could seriously compromise the crew's ability to prepare safe and nutritious meals. Water procurement was such a critical issue that pirates developed various methods for finding, collecting, and purifying fresh water, including techniques for identifying safe water sources on unfamiliar islands and coastlines. The evaluation of potential water sources required knowledge of the signs that indicated safe, clean water as opposed to contaminated or dangerous water that could cause illness or death. The testing of water quality involved simple but effective methods for determining whether water was safe to drink, including visual inspection, smell tests, and sometimes careful tasting of small amounts. The development of water procurement strategies required pirates to balance the need for fresh water with the risks involved in approaching potentially hostile or dangerous areas where water might be available. The establishment of water procurement routines during port visits or island stops required coordination and planning to ensure that adequate supplies could be obtained efficiently and safely. Rainwater collection became an important skill, with crews using sails, tarps, and other materials to capture and channel rainwater into storage containers during storms. Though this water still required careful handling to prevent contamination, the construction of rainwater collection systems required creativity and adaptability, with pirates learning to quickly deploy collection equipment when weather conditions were favorable for gathering fresh water. The purification of collected rainwater involved techniques for removing debris and contaminants that might have been picked up during the collection process, ensuring that the water would be safe for consumption and storage. The timing of rainwater collection activities had to be coordinated with other ship operations to avoid interfering with sailing activities while maximizing the amount of water that could be collected during favorable weather. The storage of collected rainwater required clean containers and proper handling to prevent contamination that could make the water unsafe or unpalatable for crew consumption. Some pirates learned to dig wells or find springs on islands where they frequently stopped creating semi-permanent sources of fresh water that could be used during return visits to the same locations. The techniques for locating underground water sources required knowledge of geology and hydrology that some pirates acquired through experience and observation of natural signs. The construction of temporary wells or water collection points required tools and labor that might not always be available, but could provide access to fresh water sources that would otherwise be inaccessible. The maintenance and protection of established water sources required ongoing effort and sometimes cooperation with other groups that might also use the same locations. The mapping and documentation of reliable water sources created valuable information that could be shared among crew members and used for planning future voyages and operations. The purification of questionable water sources involved techniques like boiling, adding alcohol or vinegar, and allowing sediment to settle before consumption, though these methods were not always effective against all types of contamination. The boiling of water for purification required fuel and time that might not always be available, forcing pirates to make difficult decisions about when and how to purify their water supplies. The addition of alcohol to water for purification purposes served dual functions by helping to kill bacteria while also providing some of the psychological and social benefits associated with alcoholic beverages. The use of filtration techniques to remove visible contaminants from water involved improvised filter systems created from available materials like cloth, sand, and charcoal. The chemical treatment of water with various additives required knowledge of the proper amounts and types of substances that would improve water safety without making the water unpalatable or dangerous to consume. Water rationing became necessary during extended voyages, with crews carefully managing their supply to ensure it would last until the next resupply opportunity, which required discipline and careful planning by ship's officers. The establishment of water rationing systems required clear rules and enforcement, mechanisms to ensure that all crew members received fair shares while preventing waste or hoarding. The monitoring of water consumption levels required regular measurement and record keeping to track usage rates and predict when resupply would become necessary. The adjustment of water rations based on weather conditions, crew size, and expected voyage duration required careful calculation and sometimes difficult decisions about reducing consumption. The psychological effects of water rationing on crew, morale, and behavior required sensitive management to maintain cooperation and prevent conflicts that could arise from water scarcity. The hierarchy of food distribution aboard pirate ships reflected the social structure of these maritime communities, with captains and officers typically receiving better quality and larger portions than ordinary crew members, though this difference was usually less extreme than in legitimate naval vessels. The establishment of food distribution hierarchies required balancing the need to maintain command authority with the democratic principles that were often important in pirate communities. The enforcement of food distribution rules required leadership, skills, and sometimes the threat of punishment to ensure that established systems were followed and that conflicts over food were minimized. The negotiation of food distribution systems often involved input from crew members and had to account for the contributions and roles of different individuals within the ship's organization. The modification of food distribution hierarchies based on changing circumstances or crew dynamics required flexibility and the ability to adapt to new situations while maintaining overall order and cooperation. Some pirate crews operated under more egalitarian principles, where food was shared equally among all members, while others maintained strict hierarchies that determined who ate what and in what order. The implementation of egalitarian food sharing systems required strong social cohesion and shared commitment to collective welfare that was not always present in pirate crews. The challenges of maintaining equal food distribution included preventing individuals from taking more than their fair share and ensuring that valuable or desirable foods were distributed fairly. The benefits of egalitarian food systems included improved crew morale and stronger sense of community, though these systems could be difficult to maintain during periods of scarcity or stress. The evolution of food distribution systems within pirate crews often reflected broader changes in crew dynamics and the success or failure of different leadership approaches. The ship's cook often held a unique position in this hierarchy, sometimes receiving special privileges or protection because of their essential role in keeping the crew fed and content. The negotiation of the cook's position within the crew hierarchy required recognition of their essential contributions while maintaining the overall command structure of the ship. The protection of the cook from conflicts and disputes was important, because their injury or loss could seriously compromise the crew's ability to maintain adequate nutrition and food preparation. The compensation of the cook for their services might include larger food portions, better quality ingredients, or other privileges that recognize their special role and responsibilities. The selection and training of ship's cooks required identifying individuals with the necessary skills and temperament to handle the demanding and essential role of feeding the entire crew. Food-related disputes could become serious issues that threatened crew cohesion. So many pirate ships developed formal or informal rules about food sharing, rationing, and the handling of special provisions. The prevention of food-related conflicts required proactive management and clear communication about expectations and consequences for violations of food-sharing agreements. The resolution of food disputes required fair and effective mechanisms for hearing complaints and determining appropriate responses to violations of food-sharing rules. The establishment of food-related rules and regulations required input from crew members and had to balance individual desires with collective needs and survival requirements. The enforcement of food rules required consistency and fairness to maintain credibility and prevent the development of resentment or resistance among crew members. The punishment for stealing food from crewmates was often severe because food theft threatened the survival of the entire group and violated the trust that was essential for effective cooperation. The investigation of food theft allegations required careful examination of evidence and testimony to ensure that accusations were accurate and that punishments were appropriate. The determination of appropriate punishments for food-related violations required balancing the need for deterrence with the practical considerations of maintaining crew size and capabilities. The implementation of food theft punishments required support from the crew and had to be carried out in ways that reinforced rather than undermined the authority and legitimacy of the ship's leadership. The prevention of food theft required security measures and monitoring systems that could detect violations without creating an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust among crew members. The procurement of fresh provisions required pirates to interact with various suppliers, including legitimate merchants, black market traders, and sometimes local populations who might be willing to trade food for other goods. The identification of reliable suppliers required developing networks of contacts and understanding the commercial and political conditions in different ports and regions. The negotiation of food purchases required skills in bargaining and evaluation of quality and value, because pirates had to obtain the best possible provisions within their budget constraints. The establishment of trading relationships with suppliers required building trust and reputation, which could be challenging for pirates who were operating outside the law. The management of supplier relationships required balancing the need for reliable access to provisions with the security concerns that arose from regular contact with people who might betray them to authorities. Some pirates maintained relationships with friendly communities or individuals who would provide food and supplies in exchange for protection, a share of profits, or other benefits that made the arrangement mutually beneficial. The development of protection arrangements required careful negotiation and clear understanding of the pay, obligations, and benefits for both parties in these complex relationships. The maintenance of protection relationships required ongoing communication, and the ability to fulfill commitments even when circumstances changed or other pressures developed. The evaluation of protection arrangements required assessing the costs and benefits of these relationships compared to other methods of obtaining provisions and supplies. The termination of protection relationships required careful handling to avoid creating enemies or security threats that could compromise the crew's safety and operations. The reputation of different pirate crews could affect their ability to obtain provisions, because communities that had been treated fairly might be willing to trade, while those that had been attacked or mistreated would be hostile and unwilling to provide assistance. The management of crew reputation required attention to how their actions would affect their future ability to obtain provisions and maintain necessary relationships with suppliers. The repair of damaged reputations required demonstrating changed behavior and sometimes providing compensation or other gestures that could rebuild trust with communities they had previously harmed. The protection of positive reputations required consistent behavior and careful attention to how their actions would be perceived by the communities they needed to work with. The evaluation of reputation effects required understanding how information about their behavior spread among different communities and how this affected their operational capabilities. Pirates often had to balance their need for supplies with the risk of exposing themselves to capture or attack when entering ports or approaching settlements to obtain food and water. The assessment of security risks associated with supply procurement required careful evaluation of the political and military situation in different areas and the likelihood of encountering hostile forces. The development of security protocols for supply operations required planning and coordination to minimize exposure, while ensuring that essential provisions could be obtained. The implementation of security measures during supply operations required discipline and adherence to established procedures even when circumstances created pressure to take shortcuts or ignore safety protocols. The evaluation of security trade-offs required balancing the need for provisions with the risks of capture, injury, or death that could result from supply operations in dangerous areas. The seasonal availability of different foods required pirates to plan their activities around natural cycles, timing their visits to different regions to coincide with harvest seasons or periods when certain foods would be most abundant and accessible. The understanding of agricultural cycles in different regions required knowledge of local farming practices and the timing of planting and harvest seasons for various crops. The coordination of pirate activities with seasonal food availability required long-term planning and the ability to adjust plans based on changing conditions and opportunities. The evaluation of seasonal opportunities required balancing the potential benefits of obtaining fresh provisions with the other factors that influenced pirate operations and decision-making. The adaptation of pirate strategies to take advantage of seasonal food availability required flexibility and the ability to modify plans based on new information about food availability and other factors. The cultural aspects of pirate food and drink reflected the diverse backgrounds of crew members who came from many different countries and traditions, creating a unique fusion cuisine that combined elements from various culinary traditions. English. Pirates might contribute knowledge of traditional British foods and cooking methods, while Spanish crew members brought different spices and preparation techniques, and Caribbean natives could provide expertise about local fruits, vegetables, and seafood. The sharing of cultural food knowledge created opportunities for learning and expanding the range of foods and cooking techniques available to the entire crew. The adaptation of traditional recipes to shipboard conditions required creativity and flexibility to work with available ingredients and equipment, while maintaining the essential characteristics of familiar dishes. The preservation of cultural food traditions within pirate crews provided connections to homeland and identity that could be important for maintaining morale and psychological well-being. the negotiation of cultural differences in food preferences, and dietary practices required tolerance and compromise to create meal plans that could satisfy crew members from different backgrounds. This cultural mixing created unique food combinations and cooking styles that were distinctly pirate, reflecting the international and multicultural nature of many pirate crews. The development of fusion cooking techniques that combined elements from different culinary traditions created new dishes and flavors that were unique to pirate culture. The documentation and preservation of fusion recipes created knowledge that could be shared among crew members and passed down to new generations of pirates. The influence of pirate fusion cuisine on the broader culinary culture of the regions where they operated created lasting changes in local food traditions and cooking methods. The adaptation of fusion cooking techniques to available ingredients and equipment required creativity and experimentation that led to innovations in food preparation and preservation. Religious and cultural dietary restrictions sometimes had to be accommodated within pirate crews, though the practical necessities of survival often took precedence over traditional food rules when supplies were limited. The negotiation of dietary restrictions within diverse crews required sensitivity and understanding of the importance of these practices to individual crew members. The adaptation of meal planning to accommodate different dietary needs required creativity and flexibility to ensure that all crew members could maintain their essential practices while sharing common food supplies. The enforcement of dietary restrictions in challenging circumstances required support from crew leadership and understanding from other crew members who might not share these practices. The evaluation of situations where dietary restrictions might need to be relaxed required careful consideration of survival needs and the importance of maintaining crew cohesion and morale. Some pirates developed preferences for foods from their homeland and would go to considerable effort to obtain familiar ingredients when possible, creating a connection to their origins, even while living as outcasts from conventional society. The procurement of homeland foods required special effort and sometimes significant expense, but could provide important psychological benefits that justified the additional costs and risks. The sharing of homeland foods with crew members from different backgrounds created opportunities for cultural exchange and the development of appreciation for different culinary traditions. The adaptation of homeland recipes to available ingredients and shipboard conditions required creativity, while maintaining the essential characteristics that made these foods meaningful to their creators. The celebration of cultural holidays and traditions through special foods provided connections to homeland and identity that could be important for maintaining psychological well-being during long voyages. The influence of different regional cuisines can be traced in historical accounts of pirate food, showing how these seafaring communities served as early examples of cultural exchange and culinary fusion. The documentation of regional food influences in pirate cuisine provides insights into the cultural backgrounds of crew members and the extent of their travels and interactions. The preservation of regional culinary knowledge within pirate communities created repositories of cultural information that might otherwise have been lost during this period of global exploration and cultural mixing. The transmission of regional food knowledge between different pirate crews created networks of cultural exchange that contributed to the broader globalization of cuisine during this historical period. The adaptation of regional foods to pirate conditions and needs created modified versions of traditional dishes that reflected both cultural heritage and practical necessities. The trading aspects of food procurement involved pirates in complex economic relationships with various suppliers and intermediaries who might help them obtain provisions in exchange for money, goods, or services. Some pirates became quite sophisticated in their trading activities, developing networks of contacts who could provide reliable access to food and supplies in different ports and regions. The establishment of trading networks required investment of time and resources to build relationships and establish credibility with potential suppliers and intermediaries. The maintenance of trading relationships required ongoing communication and the ability to fulfill commitments even when circumstances made this difficult or dangerous. The evaluation of trading opportunities required assessment of prices, quality, and reliability compared to other methods of obtaining provisions and supplies. The barter system was often more practical than cash transactions for pirates, who might trade captured goods, weapons, or other valuable items in exchange for food and provisions. The evaluation of barter opportunities required understanding the relative value of different goods and the preferences of potential trading partners in various markets and regions. The negotiation of barter agreements required skills in assessment and communication to ensure that both parties received fair value from the exchange. The logistics of barter transactions required careful planning and coordination to ensure that goods could be exchanged safely and efficiently without creating security risks. The documentation of barter agreements and transactions required record keeping that could track the value in terms of exchanges while maintaining operational security. The quality and variety of food available to pirates often depended on their rear success in capturing prizes and their ability to sell or trade stolen goods for provisions they needed. The conversion of captured goods into food supplies required access to markets and trading networks that could absorb stolen merchandise and provide the provisions needed for crew survival. The timing of prize conversion activities required balancing the need for immediate provisions with the market conditions that would provide the best value for captured goods. The evaluation of captured goods for their food procurement value required understanding of market conditions and the preferences of potential buyers in different regions. The protection of captured goods until they could be converted into provisions required secure storage and sometimes armed protection to prevent theft or confiscation. Economic factors like inflation, crop failures, or political disruptions could affect food prices and availability in different regions, forcing pirates to adapt their procurement strategies and sometimes travel to different areas to find adequate supplies. The monitoring of economic conditions in different regions required access to information and then ability to assess how changing conditions would affect food availability and prices. The adaptation of procurement strategies to changing economic conditions required flexibility and the ability to modify plans based on new information about market conditions and opportunities. The evaluation of economic risks associated with food procurement required understanding of the factors that could affect prices and availability and the development of contingency plans for dealing with adverse conditions. The diversification of food procurement sources and methods provided protection against economic disruptions that could affect any single source of provisions or trading relationship. The relationship between food and morale was critically important for pirate crews because hungry, poorly fed sailors were more likely to mutiny, desert, or perform poorly during crucial activities like battles or raids. Successful pirate captains understood that keeping their crews well fed was essential for maintaining loyalty and effectiveness, so they often prioritized food procurement even when other needs were pressing. The investment in high-quality food and provisions could provide returns in terms of improved crew performance and reduced risk of mutiny or desertion that could destroy the effectiveness of the pirate operation. The communication of food-related decisions to crew members required explaining the rationale behind resource allocation and the long-term benefits of investing in adequate nutrition and food quality. The evaluation of food-related investments required balancing immediate costs with the long-term benefits of maintaining crew morale and effectiveness through adequate nutrition and food satisfaction. Special meals or treats could be used as rewards for successful missions or as incentives for crew members to perform difficult or dangerous tasks. The planning of reward meals required careful management of resources to ensure that special foods were available when needed without compromising the overall food security of the crew. The distribution of food rewards required fairness and clear communication about the criteria for earning these. Special privileges to maintain crew morale and prevent conflicts. The timing of food rewards required coordination with mission activities and careful attention to the psychological impact of these incentives on crew motivation and performance. The evaluation of food reward programs required assessment of their effectiveness in motivating crew performance and their impact on overall food security and resource management. The psychological impact of food variety and quality affected crew mental health and overall satisfaction with pirate life, influencing whether sailors would remain with a particular crew or seek opportunities elsewhere. The management of crew expectations regarding food quality and variety required balancing realistic limitations with the need to maintain morale and satisfaction. The communication about food-related challenges and limitations required honesty about constraints while maintaining optimism about future opportunities for improvement. The evaluation of crew satisfaction with food arrangements required ongoing assessment of morale and the identification of potential problems before they became serious threats to crew cohesion. The implementation of improvements in food quality and variety required resource allocation and planning that balanced crew satisfaction with other operational needs and priorities. Food-related celebrations and traditions helped create a sense of community and belonging among pirate crews, providing positive experiences that balance the hardships and dangers of their lifestyle. The planning of food-related celebrations required coordination and resource management to ensure that special events could be held without compromising overall food security. The participation in food-related traditions required understanding and respect for the cultural backgrounds of different crew members and their contribution to the overall culture of the ship. The creation of new food-related traditions that reflected the unique culture of individual pirate crews provided opportunities for building identity and community among diverse groups of people. The evaluation of food-related celebrations and traditions required assessment of their impact on crew morale and their contribution to overall effectiveness and cohesion of the pirate operation. The preservation techniques used by pirates were often adapted from land-based methods, but had to be modified for the unique challenges of ocean voyages, including constant motion, salt air, and limited storage space. Fermentation was sometimes used to preserve certain foods and create alcoholic beverages, though this required careful control of conditions that were difficult to maintain aboard ship. The establishment of fermentation processes aboard ship required understanding of the specific conditions needed for different types of fermentation and the ability to create and maintain these conditions in challenging circumstances. The monitoring of fermentation processes required knowledge of the signs that indicated successful fermentation as opposed to spoilage or contamination that could make the food dangerous to consume. The timing of fermentation activities required coordination with other ship operations to ensure that the processes could be completed successfully without interfering with sailing activities or creating safety hazards. The equipment and containers needed for fermentation had to be adapted to shipboard conditions and might require improvisation from available materials when specialized equipment was not available. Oil preservation was used for certain foods, like fish or vegetables, creating sealed containers that could protect contents from air and moisture that would cause spoilage. The selection of appropriate oils for preservation required understanding of which oils would provide the best protection, while remaining stable during long storage periods in challenging conditions. The preparation of foods for oil preservation required specific techniques to ensure that the food would remain safe and palatable after extended storage in oil-based preservation systems. The containers and sealing methods used for oil preservation had to provide protection from contamination while allowing access to preserved foods when needed for consumption. The management of oil-preserved foods required understanding of proper storage conditions and the signs that indicated when preserved. Foods might be deteriorating or becoming unsafe for consumption. Smoking techniques required portable equipment and careful fire management to avoid creating dangerous conditions aboard wooden ships, but could produce preserved meats and fish that remained edible for extended periods. The construction of smoking. Equipment for shipboard use required creativity and adaptation of traditional smoking methods to the constraints and safety requirements of ocean vessels. The selection of fuel for smoking operations required understanding of which materials would provide the appropriate heat and smoke characteristics while being safe to use aboard ship. The timing and duration of smoking processes required knowledge of the specific requirements for different types of food and the ability to maintain proper conditions throughout the smoking period. The storage and protection of smoked foods required understanding of the conditions that would maintain the quality and safety of smoked products during extended storage aboard ship. Some pirates learned preservation methods from different cultures they encountered, adopting techniques that were particularly well suited to maritime conditions or that used ingredients readily available in certain regions. The evaluation of new preservation techniques required careful testing and assessment to determine their effectiveness and safety before incorporating them into regular food management practices. The adaptation of cultural preservation methods to shipboard conditions required understanding of the principles behind different techniques and the ability to modify them for use in challenging maritime environments. The teaching and sharing of preservation knowledge among crew members created opportunities for expanding the range of preservation techniques available to the entire crew. The documentation of successful preservation methods created knowledge that could be preserved and passed down to future crew members who needed to learn these essential survival skills. The storage solutions for preserved foods had to protect against moisture, rodents, insects, and temperature changes, while making efficient use of limited space aboard crowded pirate vessels. The construction of storage containers and systems required materials and skills that might not always be available, forcing pirates to improvise and adapt whatever resources they could obtain. The organization of food storage systems required balancing accessibility with protection, ensuring that provisions could be accessed when needed, while maintaining the conditions necessary for preservation. The monitoring of stored foods for signs of deterioration required regular inspection and the knowledge to recognize early warning signs that might indicate problems with specific food supplies. The maintenance of storage systems required ongoing attention and periodic repairs or modifications to ensure that they continued to provide adequate protection for stored provisions. Pirates developed various methods for dealing with food contamination and spoilage, including ways to salvage partially spoiled provisions by removing bad portions and using what remained, because wasting food was simply not an option when resupply might be weeks or months away. The assessment of partially spoiled food required experience and judgment to determine what portions could be safely consumed and which parts needed to be discarded to prevent illness. The treatment of contaminated storage areas required cleaning and decontamination procedures to prevent the spread of spoilage to other food supplies that might still be safe for consumption. The prevention of contamination required understanding of the factors that contributed to spoilage and the implementation of preventive measures that could reduce the risk of food loss. The recovery from food contamination incidents required rapid response and effective damage control to minimize losses and prevent further contamination of remaining food supplies. The nutritional challenges faced by pirate crews were significant because their limited diet often lacked essential vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients needed for optimal health and physical performance. Vitamin deficiencies could cause serious health problems that weakened crew members and reduced their effectiveness during crucial activities. So pirates who understood nutrition had significant advantages over those who ignored these factors. The recognition of vitamin deficiency symptoms required knowledge and experience that allowed crew members to identify nutritional problems before they became serious health threats. The treatment of vitamin deficiencies required access to appropriate foods or supplements that could provide the missing nutrients needed to restore health and prevent further deterioration. The prevention of vitamin deficiencies required understanding of which foods provided essential nutrients and the planning of food procurement and meal preparation to ensure adequate nutrition. Protein intake was generally adequate for pirates, who had access to meat, fish, and legumes, though the quality of protein sources varied considerably depending on preservation methods and storage conditions. The evaluation of protein quality required understanding of which sources provided the most complete nutrition and the best support for the physical demands of pirate life. The combination of different protein sources could provide more complete nutrition than relying on any single source, creating opportunities for improved health through dietary diversity. The preparation of protein foods to maximize their nutritional value required cooking techniques that preserve nutrients while making the food safe and palatable for consumption. The management of protein supplies required balancing immediate consumption needs with long-term storage requirements to ensure adequate nutrition throughout extended voyages. Carbohydrates were primarily provided by ships' biscuit and rice, though these refined starches lacked many nutrients found in fresh grains and vegetables that were rarely available during long voyages. The supplementation of refined carbohydrates with other foods that provided additional nutrients required planning and resource management to ensure that crews received adequate nutrition. The preparation of carbohydrate foods to maximize their nutritional contribution required techniques that could enhance their value while working within the constraints of shipboard cooking. The evaluation of different carbohydrate sources required understanding of their nutritional content and their suitability for long-term storage and shipboard preparation. The management of carbohydrate supplies required balancing energy needs with storage limitations and the availability of different sources in various regions and markets. Fresh fruits and vegetables were highly prized not only for their taste, but also for the essential vitamins and minerals they provided, making them valuable commodities that crews would compete for when available. The procurement of fresh produce required special effort and sometimes significant expense, but provided nutritional benefits that justified the additional costs and challenges. The storage and preservation of fresh fruits and vegetables required techniques that could extend their useful life while maintaining their nutritional value and palatability. The preparation of fresh produce to maximize its nutritional contribution required understanding of which preparation methods preserved the most nutrients while making the food safe and appealing. The distribution of fresh produce among crew members required fairness and planning to ensure that everyone received some benefit from these valuable but limited resources. Some pirate crews developed knowledge about edible sea plants, seaweed, and other marine vegetation that could supplement their diet with additional nutrients and variety. The identification of edible marine plants required knowledge and experience to distinguish between safe and dangerous species that might be encountered in different ocean regions. The harvesting of marine vegetation required techniques and equipment that could collect these resources safely and efficiently while the ship was underway or anchored. The preparation of marine plants for consumption required understanding of proper cleaning and cooking methods that would make them safe and palatable for crew members. The nutritional evaluation of marine vegetation required understanding of which species provided the most valuable nutrients and how they could best contribute to overall crew health. The medical aspects of nutrition were gradually understood by more experienced pirates who observed the connection between diet and health, leading to practices that helped prevent common diseases and maintain crew wellness. The development of nutritional medicine required accumulation of knowledge through observation and experience about which foods helped prevent or treat specific health problems. The application of nutritional knowledge to crew health management required understanding of individual needs and the ability to modify diets to address specific health concerns or deficiencies. The communication of nutritional information to crew members required education and explanation that helped people understand the importance of dietary choices for their health and performance. The evaluation of nutritional interventions required assessment of their effectiveness in preventing disease and maintaining crew health over extended periods of challenging conditions. Certain foods were recognized as having medicinal properties, such as citrus fruits for preventing scurvy or certain herbs for treating digestive problems, creating a practical medical knowledge base that was shared among crew members. The identification of medicinal foods required knowledge of which specific foods provided therapeutic benefits and understanding of proper dosages and preparation methods. The procurement of medicinal foods required special attention during supply operations to ensure that these valuable resources were available when health problems arose. The preparation of medicinal foods required understanding of the specific techniques that would maximize their therapeutic value while making them acceptable for consumption by crew members. The administration of medicinal foods required knowledge of proper timing and dosages to ensure effectiveness while avoiding potential adverse effects from overconsumption. The preparation of medicinal foods or tonic drinks became part of the ship's routine for maintaining crew health, especially during long voyages when fresh provisions were unavailable. The development of medicinal food preparations required experimentation and refinement to create effective remedies that could be prepared with available ingredients and equipment. The scheduling of medicinal food administration required integration with regular meal planning to ensure that therapeutic foods were consumed at appropriate times and intervals. The evaluation of medicinal food effectiveness required observation and assessment of crew health outcomes to determine which preparations provided the most benefit for different health concerns. The documentation of medicinal food knowledge created information that could be preserved and shared among crew members to improve overall health management capabilities. Pirates often carried simple medicines and remedies that were mixed with food or drink to treat common ailments, making the ship's cook an important figure in maintaining crew health as well as providing nutrition. The integration of medical and culinary responsibilities required cooks to understand both food preparation and basic medical care to provide comprehensive support for crew health and wellness. The procurement of medical substances required special attention during supply operations to ensure that essential remedies were available when health problems arose among crew members. The storage and preservation of medical substances required understanding of proper conditions and containers that would maintain their effectiveness while protecting them from contamination and deterioration. The administration of medical remedies required knowledge of proper dosages and timing to ensure effectiveness while avoiding potential adverse effects from improper use of these substances. In conclusion, the story of what pirates really ate and drank reveals a fascinating world of survival, adaptation, and surprising sophistication that goes far beyond the stereotypical images we see in popular culture, showing us real human beings who faced extraordinary challenges and developed creative solutions to keep themselves alive and thriving in one of history's most dangerous and demanding lifestyles. And through this deep exploration of their daily sustenance, we can see how these seafaring adventurers managed to maintain not only their physical health, but also their morale and cultural identity while pursuing their illegal but undeniably adventurous careers on the high seas, creating a complex and nuanced picture of pirate life that encompasses everything from basic survival needs to sophisticated culinary traditions and medical knowledge that help them navigate the countless challenges of life aboard ship. And I hope this comprehensive journey through pirate cuisine has given you a new appreciation for the ingenuity, resourcefulness, and humanity of these remarkable historical figures who continue to capture our imagination centuries after they sailed the world's oceans in search of fortune and adventure. So thank you for joining me on this extensive culinary voyage through pirate history. And I'll see you in the next video, where we'll explore another fascinating aspect of life during the golden age of piracy.